memorizes her finger movements, he starts to toss the kunais in several different directions, hitting some of the kunais on the forest, forcing Tayuya's summons to block a few of the kunais, but the positioning of the kunais was all to make sure Tayuya would attack Shikamaru the correct way for him. She launches a direct assault, but Shikamaru had tossed a kunai with a flashbang beforehand, and he uses that flashbang that's behind Tayuya's summons to extend their shadows so Shikamaru could simply connect his shadow to theirs without even having to use the shadow possession jutsu to extend his shadow forward because the shadows from the summons are extending towards him. Shikamaru gains control of the 3 summons and attacks Tayuya, but obviously Tayuya just unsummons them. They may have been under Shikamaru's control, but they were Tayuya's summons, so she can unsummon them, but Shikamaru obviously predicted that. Shikamaru attacking Tayuya with her unsummons was a distraction, because when he did so and when Tayuya unsummoned them, Shikamaru was already weaving his shadow possession around the trees of the forest outside of Tayuya's view to catch her from behind and start to strangle her with his shadow. So that strategy had several layers to them so that Shikamaru could once again catch the enemy with his shadow possession just like he did with Temari, but this time it's a real enemy in a real fight. Shikamaru has to try and eliminate her, which he fails because Tayuya can resist Shikamaru's shadow possession as it was established before. He doesn't completely control you can overpower it, and Shikamaru cannot strangle her as she activates the second stage of her curse mark and uses her auditory genjutsu on him, which works, and Shikamaru sees his arm melting in that weird genjutsu world. And as Tayuya jumps towards Shikamaru to finish him off, he breaks himself out of the genjutsu using his own shadow to break his finger, and now he can use the shadow possession from a much shorter range to catch Tayuya with it. The shorter the range, the more powerful his grasp is, and that was the final step of his strategy, to draw Tayuya in so that he could use his shadow with much more power. Now in the end, it didn't work because Tayuya was still overpowering him. If Temari hadn't arrived, Shikamaru would have lost the fight, which was very much thematic for Shikamaru's arc. Him losing there signified that, oh, he has to do better, he has to be a more effective leader, put more work into his training and things like that, because obviously he failed the mission, his friends almost died, and he lost his fight if it wasn't for Temari. But even though he quote-unquote lost to Tayuya, it still felt like a very intelligent fight with his multi-layer strategy, and the results resemble the results against Temari. But in here, obviously Shikamaru couldn't give up. He had to keep on fighting because he was going to die. He couldn't just, say, oh, I quit the fight. Overall, pretty great moment, and Kishimaru keeps on making Shikamaru create clever strategies every time he fights. And you can see how Kishimaru crafted Tayuya's powers to suit what he needed to do for Shikamaru during the fight. Giving her summons that she can control with her fingers by playing the flute allowed for Shikamaru to deduce her movements and come with a grand strategy to capture them and use that as a distraction to catch Tayuya with his shadow possession. Also using the environment, not as much as in the Chunin Exams Arena now, but just using the trees to hide his shadow possession and catch Tayuya from behind. Tayuya's powers interacted in a very interesting way with Shikamaru by allowing Shikamaru to capture her summons, which was a very hype moment during the fight, and also for Shikamaru to break himself out of the genjutsu using his own shadow, which is a very creative usage of his new shadow strangulation jutsu. Shikamaru's utility usage with the kunais and flashbangs was also one of the most interesting ever done in the series in this fight, and even though the guy has 2 jutsus now going for him, which are just 2 varieties of the same jutsu pretty much, it still feels like he's a mastermind when it comes to fights. But of course, Shikamaru's magnum opus comes in Naruto Shippuden with his only fight. Well, he technically fights 2 times in Naruto Shippuden, 2 major fights, but they're all against the same opponent, Hidan. And out of every single opponent Shikamaru has ever faced, Hidan's powers were very much crafted for Shikamaru's strategic mind to work against them. In Shikamaru's first fight against him, Asuma is actually leading the squad and being the spearhead of the fight. Shikamaru is providing support and analyzing Hidan's movements. Now, Hidan's ritual is very intricate. He needs to draw blood from the enemy, drink that blood, and then draw the circle on the ground with a triangle inside to perform the ritual, and he has to be on the circle itself. There are several steps for that ritual, and Shikamaru manages to decipher pretty much all of them in their first fight. However, it's not enough, and Asuma still gets killed. Well, Shikamaru and Asuma would have won the fight if Kakuzu hadn't sewed Hidan's head back into his body, but still. Shikamaru deduces that Hidan needs to be on the circle in order to perform the ritual, so much so that they test the theory. Asuma tosses shuriken that nicks his ear when Shikamaru managed to pull him out of the circle, and it didn't hurt Asuma's ear. And obviously Shikamaru deduces how how the jutsu is activated. So he has everything he needs to know for the second fight against Hidan and Kakuzu, in which he performs his grand strategy. Well, the first thing is that he prepares a battlefield in the forest where he's going to take Hidan, and we see that whenever he manages to separate Hidan from Kakuzu and arrives at the forest, it's filled with paper bombs all around, which Hidan doesn't take notice, but it's very obvious that Hidan went into enemy territory, so to speak. Regardless, Hidan is not the most intelligent opponent here. After all, Shikamaru managed to catch Hidan pretty much off guard in order to separate him from Kakuzu. He didn't expect Shikamaru to come in close and connect his shadow to Hidan's shadow by proximity and not by launching it. But when he reaches the forest, that's when the magic begins, because Hidan rushes Shikamaru after his shadow possession quote-unquote fades away because, oh no, my chakra. Obviously there was a feint by Shikamaru. Hidan rushes him and draws blood out of Shikamaru's cheek. He drinks the blood, he makes the ritual, and he pierces his own heart. Shikamaru pretends he got really hurt and he's going to die, but the blood was from Kakuzu, which Kakashi extracted beforehand whenever he Reikiri'd Kakuzu from behind and gave the blood to Shikamaru so that Shikamaru could use the blood on Hidan's own ritual without Hidan even knowing that he is taking away one of Kakuzu's hearts. Now, they didn't know Kakuzu's abilities before they went into the fight, and Kakashi could have really well thought that, okay, I killed this guy with my Reikiri, I don't even have to take the blood out of him now. Luckily, Kakashi did. He's a very cautious guy, and he gave the blood to Shikamaru so that he could perform the ritual. Now, I've seen some people saying that Shikamaru managing to hit the blood straight on Hidan's weapon as Hidan is swinging it is kind of ridiculous because it requires a lot of speed and coordination, but I mean, sure, it's a shonen. They do these sorts of things and they have superhuman reflexes, so that's fine. And well, after Shikamaru pretends he got killed by Hidan's ritual, he jumps and tries to behead Hidan, and then he uses the environment he had prepared beforehand in order to trap Hidan on several paper bombs and explodes Hidan in a very climactic and satisfying scene, burying him on that hole that Shikamaru dig before the fight, and he wins the fight and also helps Kakashi and the team against Kakuzu in the process. So not only does he finesse Hidan and Akatsuki member with strategy in a 1v1 fight, he is also fighting against Kakuzu in a way and helping his team in a fight that's happening a few miles away, I have to assume. And you can see how every single ability was crafted for that moment. Hidan drinking the blood, so oh, I can take the blood from someone else and give it to Hidan. He's not gonna notice. I mean, it tastes like blood. How Kakuzu had several hearts, and how Shikamaru weaponizing Hidan's ritual against him but not completely kill him and take him out of the fight. And obviously the fact that Hidan is immortal plays very well first with the entire fighting that was going on. Oh god, we killed him, we beheaded him. Oh, actually no, he's still alive. So Shikamaru had to come up with something very clever in order to explode him into pieces so that he couldn't come back and bury him forever. Now, according to the data books, Hidan has died of malnutrition while he was buried there, but that's so stupid. It's much more interesting if he just stays there forever, cursed by his own curse. And that was pretty much Shikamaru's magnum opus in the Naruto series. His most impactful fight where he used a strategy to beat his opponent, and also an opponent far away, Akatsuki members at that. And it's actually the second fight in the series that Shikamaru wins, because of course he wins against Kin, but he actually loses all his fights after that, against Temari, Tayuya, and the first fight against Hidan and Kakuzu, so he wins this time. But you can see how Hidan's abilities had to be crafted for Shikamaru to come up with that strategy and for Shikamaru's fight to be satisfactory, and that's because, let's be real here, he still didn't have much of an arsenal. Sure, he can use the Sui shadows, but that doesn't really give him all that much more than he already had. The entire strategy here revolved around how Shikamaru would counter Hidan's powers, and he didn't even use his own shadows for that. He simply used some misdirection and sleight of hand because he didn't realize Kakashi had taken blood from Kakuzu, and he didn't realize Shikamaru put Kakuzu's blood on Hidan's blade. And that's why Shikamaru is so difficult to write for. Not necessarily because of his arc or personality. I'm pretty sure Kishimoto likes to do those things, but coming up with new fights for Shikamaru to be intelligent on, seeing that he has to be intelligent in every single fight because that's his shtick, is extremely difficult. So much so that Shikamaru does not have a 1v1 ever again, which I have to say is kind of a waste. Yeah, it is difficult to come up with a fight for Shikamaru, but I think Kishimoto could have come up with something. Then again, Shikamaru is one of the few characters from the Konoha 12 members that got an end for their character arc in Naruto Shippuden, because most of them didn't. I mean, if you discount Naruto and Sasuke, obviously. Take a look at Lee, or Shino, or Ino, or Choji, or even Hinata. They did not get a satisfactory end for their character arcs. And yeah, Shikamaru's first quote-unquote end comes in very early on in Naruto Shippuden, and there could have been other things that Kishimoto would do afterwards to develop Shikamaru's character further, but at least he got something, and it was very good, unlike Neji, who didn't do anything for the entirety of Naruto Shippuden, and then he just kind of randomly dies to a twig in the war arc. But after seeing how meticulously Kishimoto had to craft Shikamaru's opponents and their abilities in order for the fights to feel interesting, and also the environment Shikamaru was put into those fights, you can understand why it was a headache for Kishimoto to write Shikamaru, especially when he had to fight. That could have been solved by giving Shikamaru some more diverse powers, maybe something that's not completely related to shadows, but honestly, I think that would be quote-unquote cheating a bit. The thing about Shikamaru is that he doesn't have a lot in his arsenal, but he can produce so much with the little that he has because of his sheer intellect and just overall mentality of faking out his opponents, just like a shinobi should do. And all that combined with his very good character arc, character themes, and also personality makes for great and memorable fights in the Naruto series, even if they may not be as important as other fights, like Shikamaru versus Temari. In the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter all that much, but because the character is so interesting and the strategy is so well thought out, it's extremely entertaining and it makes the series better for it. Watch this other video right here for more cool Naruto content. Definitely subscribe if you haven't done so already and ring those notifications so you always know the videos come out. And also like this video, please. Those things really help the channel out. Comment down below some other opponents that could have fought Shikamaru and make for an interesting fight. And thank you so much for watching.
This is what? There's nothing on the address? So
the Saiyans emerge from the time chamber and everyone is stressing. Cell just absorbed 17 and none of the Z fighters can handle him. At least that's what these.
All right, let's figure this out. What's going on here? MSCC. It could be that that's an older order and the margin, 100% of the margin moved out of available. And there's nothing unavailable. And I didn't implement the switch to distinguish between them. Initial reduce is the switch. And maybe that switch is not occurred. So let's take a look. So I got my data footprint's getting too big to just eyeball these NADB files. I've been spamming Oracle updates. It's all in reserve. It's already reserved. And it's not enough. It's a different. Well, then if it's an existing order, then the margin should be that anyway, because that's matching at the lower price. No? Some of these edge cases are important. You know, most people aren't going to use the order book. It's mostly for the insurance fund acting as like protocol owned liquidity in the AMM to catch liquidations, basically. So expanding on what I was thinking of last time, so if there's 150K TLs in the insurance fund and it's doing this K times P equals T or whatever that far, it's like basically it's an inverse quota contract, so you never get liquidated on the way up. And as the LTC TL, the TL LTC price increases, the amount of synthetic Litecoins that are effectively in the insurance fund on its book of 75 up to 75K worth of TL tokens short is going to be less. It's going to be more and more synthetic Litecoins. You can just have orders all along the curve of possible prices infinitely, and they just get smaller in terms of how many TL notional they are worth. And then also the fund is losing TL in that regard, but then the others there's going to be 75K that are going to be unexposed to this hedge. So it approaches the 75K at some price threshold. Let's say it's 0.5 LTC, so it's like 30,000 LTC. That's $3 million. This is like a modest little synthetic stable coin, and then going up towards 1 LTC, 2 LTC, it's incrementally selling more because the 50/50 is appreciated. So then meanwhile, the fees are buying up the TLs that are not in the fund. The fund is obviously losing TL to people who are long, and they're kind of flipping it around. But eventually, somebody gets liquidated, or just sells into those orders that are below. And most of the volume is going to be in the channels, and the AMM is like canceling and replacing orders. So you don't have to sell into those orders to move them. So it's mostly going to be liquidations, and but sometimes people will also use the on-chain order book and sell into that. So basically, it should be accumulating TLs on a net basis over time, even if it's losing in the short term, and just becoming a bigger and bigger protocol. And liquidity thing, all the TL gets more scarce and keeps the squeeze on, and then the synthetic Litecoin, because there's only so many perps that can be outstanding that people are going to tend to pay a premium for them most of the time, and then sometimes they'll trade at a discount anyway. The market's dumping. And I can program it in where it starts to cover that and sell them for something else. But then you get into this game of what is that like approved stable coin. So if it's like bridged LUSD, for example, when I complete the systematic bridge, that could be cool, for example. So maybe I'll do that in a later update. That way it can make more alpha on buying discounts and avoiding the negative funding. So anyway, meanwhile, basically it's there to prevent the SLTC from ever blowing up, but also to like have something that's not, in a Cayman Islands corporation or in it's just protocol and liquidity. It's systematic value accrual. It's built into the thing that flywheels with the cash flow buyback aspect. So this is the idea that there's a dilemma between a DeFi protocol having discounted cash flows to justify its token's existence versus most businesses don't do that. But this isn't a business, man. It's a DAO. It's like the new decentralized thing. So what is that? We're still kind of figuring it out. What's the right thing? And generally speaking, 4 years ago, with some crazy ideas that didn't work out, but the overall thrust was more or less correct. This idea that the cash flow should be reinvested into a systematic protocol and liquidity of some kind, and therefore there's this useful compounding of it rather than it simply being distributed. Also, buybacks are more tax efficient for like U.S. and a lot of countries where the tax code is very not nice to dividends, probably because dividends were the preferred way for stocks to return capital to investors like 100 years ago, and then that became obviously abused by the tax code. Like the wealthy people are rentiers. There was like a 90% income tax rate in the United States at one point in the mid 20th century, and then at a very high level, like two to $3 million, which would be like $10 million today. So in other words, it was like penal. It was trying to prevent like the Black Rocks of its time from like or the private before there was BlackRock, it was like private families from basically dominating the whole society. So it's almost like Georgism in a sense. Because where's that yield coming from? It's coming from dividends on stocks, on like, Johnson and Johnson and like US Steel and like core. This was how the US economy was back then. So it's almost like those dividends are like a value added tax that aren't tariffs, they're on domestic production, and the economy had already sort of shifted away from the tariff base by the mid 20th century. That's a whole other talk. But and then so we're like paying all these profits in when we like build buildings with U.S. Steel, or when we go to the pharmacy, or Archer Daniels Midland, we're going to buy Kellogg cereal, etc. Right? So dividends were like targeted that way, and then obviously with the rents. Um, And then what people did was they tried to, well, the 90% is crazy. What can they come up with every trick in the book to try and like create deductions so that they can like expense their country club membership or expense their car or whatever, right? So then AMT was introduced, and then this went back and forth. Then you had Reaganomics, and then the tax rates went lower and lower. And then you had the declining interest rates and the boom in real estate and bonds and stocks, and we got used to this like 10 to 30-ish% marginal tax rates in the U.S., right? And like countries in Europe, for example, didn't haven't really even caught up to that, right? So this is like maybe there's something to that. But on the other hand, you've had like the real estate bubble and whatnot. So maybe there was something to this crudely, almost Georgist high tax rate for the people who were like the dominant landlord rent seekers. Even though on paper 90% tax rates or 80 or 70, they're like it's crazy. Anything over 40 is kind of crazy, because now it's like, what am I paying half or more to the government? It sounds wrong. A third is like, oh, that's a lot, but it's like, okay, I guess that's the price of freedom or whatever. So anyway, dividends get double taxed, right? So the corporation can't deduct it. They pay corporate income tax rate. It used to be 35% before Trump, right? At the higher level. And then you might be paying 35% again as the recipient of the dividend. And then, so that actually does add up to, it's 35% of 65%, right? So it's, 22 and some change percent on top of 30, so it is over a little bit over 50%. Yeah, so that's why you don't see, tokens just spitting dust out of the cash flow. So like Vertex does this, you have to stake it, so that's how they get you. Um, yeah. So let's take a look at that. That's kind of an interesting case study in DeFi. So I was just reading Dimitri's Back to Bunny's white paper, which I'm going to obviously keep confidential as he requests in the draft state. But it got me thinking about these parallels. So, 64 million fully diluted, as usual, right? So the insiders are holding 2/3. Circulating is, and the TL token is not going to be any different, really. If you discount, yeah, because of it's just like I made mistakes, and I have like this loaded cap table, and then I got all these dusting tokens, like half the supply. But they're going to take a while to vest. Like this thing needs to actually flourish in order for them to vest, and it's going to have some juice in it. But yeah, this token has not. So like it's easy to say, oh, it would be the next hyperliquid. Well, Hyperliquid's, really a mimetic phenomenon in some level. It's like a meme coin and it's Vertex. So this is the difference is like, they're trading at $29 billion. It's only 64 million. So we're talking about like a 300x, 400x price, well, the market cap difference in these tokens, right? When they started doing their incentivized program and they didn't alert me. So this was another scammy thing they do. So I might have been able to cash in on a couple $1,000. It's nothing compared to like Hyperliquid points. If I'd been trading Hyperliquid, I would be a millionaire right now for sure. But say la vie, I did it for God because they have interest in the perps, and we have to get away from interest in DeFi, right? This is fundamental. We can't just recreate the same old system. So anyway, may Allah, may the God uh, help me to succeed in doing that. And these guys, the reason they don't do that. They just have it be the raw price premium. They don't have a clamp either. So I think I am going to have a clamp so that there's a structural sort of volatility arbitrage by parking open interest on trade layer, and then you come over to Vertex, for example, and farm the yield that they're overpaying on perp fees funding. So anyway, which is a profit share, so I don't consider it to be interest because it's definitely not only correlated but structurally linked to the actual P&L of the people paying it. It's not always 100% correlation, but it is structural enough that there's a causal link. So yeah, basically, like people would just, take this because they don't believe that this is going to be hyper liquid, and they have to play this on Sui base as well as Arbitrum, where I've traded on it. It's deployed on I think maybe two or three other places. It's almost like that strategy did not really get them anywhere. Um, do they have any perps on this to hedge it? Because funnily enough, they don't have it on Vertex. It's almost like they don't want you to be able to play games with that. So anyway, and it's a finite amount, so so part of this insider chunk is further vesting. But anyway, people basically just farm it, dump it. Staking has been a bad strategy since it's gotten beat down. The staking starts to make more sense, but then their volume has also declined. So whereas they were making like 120K a week in fees, they were so now I'm Shikamaruing this industry. It's like the theme of this. Um, let's see. No, this is not. Well, maybe. Yeah. Oh, that's spot. I see. 80 odd million. Yeah, that's underdoing it. Um, there you go. There's that 3 billion. Darabit. If Darabit had a token, man. I don't know if it would be valued at Hyperliquid. So this is another case study, right? This is the mimetic effect. Yeah, so they're only doing. Oh, okay, that's volume versus open interest. Oh, wow, they're doing even better. And Deribit's actually see. So this is where Deribit is that has that clamp and the no interest. So it's like the funding arb gas station, if you will, the tether, if you will. Yeah, less volume than open interest. KuCoin with high fees and a janky interface is doing well. BitMEX, the king is not dead, but has it's like the Abbasid Caliphate for the last 500 years before the Mongols came. And then yeah, here you got Vertex on Mantle on Say. I thought it was Sui. I can't you can't tell the difference between these base. There's Blast as well. You don't see that. So they've like aggregated them all and they've got actually decent volume still. They're back. So the yield on this thing might actually be like in the 40 to 50% range. So it's like the value play. But the market just doesn't care about that because so they get 2 basis points on this, right? So like 148 times 7 times there you go. 200K. I guess they don't distribute all of that to the stakers. They want to pay their hosting bills and whatnot for their centralized sequencer. Um, so, anyways, I believe because of what I'm offering as a structural solution to these proof of work chains, and that also it's less crowded for now. Maybe I can capture some of that monetary premium that Hype has. So anyway, let's get back into debugging this. We'll be right back. So anyway, if I could get to 60 mil, that would be a pretty nice performance, and it would get people juiced up, and then they would probably flip a lot of supply if they're not true believers. They're not going for that hyper liquid. It's wild, bro. That would be like 15x, but then it's like, there's another 400x, making it a total of 6,000x from the initial offering prices. 6,000x to Hyperliquid. There are people saying, well, Hyperliquid could go to like $80 or $150. Um, so that would juice it up further to like 20,000x. So you put $1,000 in there and you get $20 million out. And that's crazy to think about. Or even $6 million for 1,000. Anyway, this is the kind of talk that juices people up. And I don't want to make any promises. This is, even if I'm like, acknowledge this is filtered from US persons until, at some point it's gonna be regulation. I can put out a thing, put out like a bulletin, self-disclosure reports, do some kind of registration of this. We'll see what they come up with because obviously it creates a loophole. But why not just tokenize instead of doing Reg CF where you can only buy it back and so on. But you make it a token, and now people can. It's harder to do those Reg CF restrictions, and you don't have to go through the platform. So why not just make it a token? But then again, like the president of the United States was literally dumped like multiple billions of like a worthless meme coin bearing his name. So who knows where they'll go with that? They might just say, "Who cares about Reg CF?" Like that was an Obama administration idea. It was dumb. Like we're just blowing the doors open, and then at least we'll have better quality stuff being sold than racial slur meme coins and so on. Anyway, but yeah, the tokenomics at like 60 mil, that would be enough juice that people are going to start like cashing out their derivatives and so on. And what would happen is that even if there's like you realize the TL, so at a 60 odd million fully diluted, that's about 100 and some per coin, right? Per TL. So I'm selling them at 5. So uh so it's actually more than a 15x, right? So it's pretty good. And the point being that half a Litecoin right now is about $60. So yeah, I mean, essentially that's kind of like the VWAP for this sort of plotting, getting to like 100 odd mil daily volume, like Vertex, right? And then I don't think the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is really selling this. We'll play that in a minute once I spin this wheel here, because it reminded me of that. And then the actual amount of TL, the amount of synthetic Litecoin being like a few tens of thousands. Like obviously, like that can't be the only collateral. Like so, by then I plan on, we'll see how the timelines line up. Obviously, getting juiced sooner is cool, but I plan on being able to bridge in stuff from near uh, through Ethereum. So LUSD is my preferred stablecoin, but others could come on board. LUSD has about 50 million in supply, and I think Litecoin will probably be higher. Maybe trade layer will be like catalytic to that, and then there's going to be more TL profits, like the actual notional value in Litecoin at the peak of like this initial move, and hopefully this is like the Elliott wave one of a bigger thing, where we ultimately, because like I did the math, in order to get to the scale where we actually fill up the Litecoin blocks and we create a fee market and we push the fees up about 10x to multiple dollars, kind of like where Bitcoin fees are right now. And then that as we get into the next Litecoin halving in 2027, 2028, it becomes about a third of the Litecoin miner revenue. And then we can like swell it from there perhaps as well. But it involves essentially like Binance level volumes, which is not what Hyperliquid is doing yet. But that I'm estimating maybe 1/10 or 1/20th of that is actually published when I do that estimation, because there's this string theory in folded dimensions. You know, you can be signing transactions in the channel and not publishing them. And I expect people to take advantage of that and be batch settling when they pay the $5 or the $10. So that way it is actually, because like, okay, if you're trading 10K lots and you trade them 20 times, so you do 10 round trips with like your day trading bot before you pay one amount of that on chain. So you're paying 50 cents, maybe round trips. You're paying $1 in protocol fee. And then let's say you're paying $1 in Litecoin fee. So Litecoin goes higher, you're paying 1 millilite in fee. So right now you could get away with paying 3,000 sats. I'm talking about paying basically 100,000 sats. So quite a lot more, and at higher prices, because it gets to you to $1. And then that isn't the like Solana-esque so cheap it's like a dream fees that this pay with Litecoin meme is touting. So it's like, oh, Litecoin is, we go through the same stuff that we were going through in 2017, 16, where the fees were really expensive. And we're like, what happened to Bitcoin? I used to be able to just move it. Well, it didn't cost me hardly anything. It's like, well, yeah, that was when it was a baby. Now it's kind of, it's going to school and getting into fights, you know, it's growing up. So, it's like 7, you know, well, 8, I guess. So yeah, Litecoin's got to go through the same thing. So logically, that means that we need to have about 1 million transactions per day, um, times creates $1 million a day, right? Whereas you have 6 times 24 times 24 times 6.25. Okay, so that's how many Litecoins are being minted every day. And then we got yeah, $2 million a day being essentially paid. Like, so part of the reason why this chart, not that chart because that looks good, right? But more like this chart is so bloody lumpy, and it gets worse as you go. I mean, it's like this is like a lot of charts in this industry where instead of it being the miners are dumping, and they are dumping, right? It is, insiders dumping their sort of pre-mined security token, right? But that is what this is. They're raking that, and then and the fees are like nothing. It's like we can fill up the chain with 1 million transactions a day for about $600-700, paying the 3,000 sats. So what I'm essentially calling for is like a 30x increase of that in terms of pressure from having them be perennially full. So it only takes we have about 200K day in payments, which is what's cool about Litecoin. That's the factoid that Litecoin holders tend to cling to because it's It's what's going for it right now. But so like I get that five, 600, $700 number from filling up the other 800K daily transactions with trade layer prints. Okay. So 800K times what is that? 10, let's call it $10,000, about, zero point 0.1 BTC sized flips. And that is $8 billion a day. So that is actually hyperliquid level. Okay. And that is not $800,000 a day in fee income. It would be um, it's hardly anything because we're not paying competitive fees, right? So it'd be 800,000 times like this times 164. It's like a rounding error. It's just a few grand on top of like millions, right? Every day. So we need to make this number more like this. Now we're talking, right? And then this thing gets cut in half and it becomes 50-50 in a few years. Um, so that's kind of where this needs to go. And actually, this is about a buck and some change. So you're paying more to the miners than you are to trade layer, which to me is not that interesting. So you could instead do this would be like you do the round trip in a single batch, which is like level one batching in my schema that I went over in another video. You got the initial trade, you got a trade to keep it alive, you got a trade to package them up, and you got to trade that like sandwiches that whole quartet into one. And that achieves this 50% efficiency reduction. So that would kind of be this. Then you've got like referring to all of those signed transactions. You nullify them by referring to the timestamps in the initial transaction, which is why you need the timeout so that you're not playing this game theory thing. There's a time limit now. It's in this ether zone of the channel. Once you sign that second transaction, and the third and the fourth, so then you eventually do that however many times, and then you sign the noodles. So you can just batch it all up into one transaction. So it becomes unlimited in its potential scaling. So what that means is that you would be settling $8 billion a day on chain, maybe less. Um, but you would actually be trading maybe 10 or 100 times as much, right? So like truly like $1 trillion per day is what like the CME's just does like 70, 80 billion in notional just on gold futures alone, okay? E-minis, let's pull it up. E-minis, I'm guessing they're like 200 Bs right off the bat. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm guessing these are millions. Yeah. All figures in millions. Yeah. Okay. So $37 trillion a day is what CME does. And sure, these are lower volatility instruments. People will casually trade more notional. Um, Interest rate, therefore, is like half of that. It's almost $16 trillion a day. So you trade a euro dollar contract, it's $1 million notional per contract. That's like the minimum you can do. And therefore, it's $1 per basis point. I'm sorry, it's $1 per tick, which is a hundredth of a basis point. So a basis point on $1 million is $100. And then therefore there are like interest rates don't move many percent. Like 5% is like kind of your range for like a decade or maybe a little more than that. Until the US turns into like Argentina, then it starts to get more volatile. Okay, but like, so we're talking about 5,000 ticks, which is about, what you would expect, right? If Bitcoin's tick is like $10, that's what the ETF price is in, then, you know, 50K to 100K is 5,000 ticks, right? So, obviously go to pennies on Binance and so on. But like in terms of like real price discovery, it is more like $10 tick. I mean, like these penny ticks are just kind of dancing in the moonlight. We were dancing in the moonlight, everybody. So then it kind of moves the tick. There you go. Yeah, I mean, that moved like tick and a half. So, in real terms, in terms of micro volatility, it is like $10 a tick. Yeah, I mean, bro, you kidding me? And they do about as much, they do a little bit less revenue than Binance, and they're valued about where, give or take 10%, where Binance is, or BNB is valued. So this is why I don't really buy Solana going to $1 trillion or or Hyperliquid going to much more than $80 billion. I think it could temporarily go to $150 billion. And I mean, like for Litecoin to go to $1,000, we're talking about Litecoin going to like $100 billion in value, right? So you see how this all dovetails. Like if you now there's more value to Litecoin than its free cash flow. It's being valued at, everyone's complaining, oh, why is the price so low? Well, it's $10 billion, right? So the market's valuing Litecoin at $10 billion for being like one third of the revenue incentive for the script proof of work network. So like there's a sense that that's useful. Obviously, Doge is like $40 billion because there's a cute dog. So it's got this meme coin thing going for it, and Litecoin's been trying to succor that and cultivate that. It kind of worked. Okay, but and Litecoin was like $5 billion not long ago, just a few months ago, before they started doing that, right? So they like sort of garnished it by about double on the basis of like, well, it should catch up with other things. It's a meme coin, blah blah blah. So this digital silver narrative is worth something, and that can be a force multiplier where it can be worth $100 billion without there being Binance or even Hyperliquid level flow, or that we could have Hyperliquid level flow filling up the blocks, having some amount of fee market. It's not so expensive that you pay a dollar to send a couple $100. It doesn't feel terrible. People aren't like complaining. Like $15, it's like, okay, this is pricing out the global south and so on, right? Like people start to complain. Um, and yeah, basically, in order to get to like $1 trillion, like all the bulls are like, well, it's just going to be that people are going to start giving it the same monetary premium that Bitcoin has. But I think if we do this, if we can do $37 trillion a day on the L2, so this isn't all going to go on chain, right? Like if it went on chain, just for the sake of argument, okay. This is a lot of zeros, bro. Ba, ba, ba. What would that look like? Even with the little, I mean, it's a billion and 850 in in fee revenue per day. So it's crazy, right? Like this is not economical. So this is where the scaling comes in. I'm not like, oh, I'm like Mother Teresa over here with this. You don't have to pay fees if you do it in the channel. It's like this. There's a vision here, right? This isn't a. I mean, I am an altruistically minded person, God willing, but I am not. There's a realpolitik to this, right? So, so 100. If there's 100x scaling factor, where 100 times, only 1% of the volume gets settled, basically because you want to move around between counterparties, because of the price competition between them, and that you want to rebalance. Um, and you can do transfers and move your collateral around, but at some point, coupled with volatility, you need to settle out P&L in one channel in order to really transfer things around. So this is where we hit the brakes on this, 100x factor. Like that's why I'm not suggesting maybe it's 1,000x. And now we're talking about 18.5, and Binance do like let's call it like 35 billion, but let's be a little conservative. 30 billion, and they're doing like the fee tiers. I don't know. I'm gonna say like 4 basis points on average because most of the volume is done by the lower fee tiers. Um, but that tends to be maker rebate, and then you got a lot of people paying, 5 basis points. So make rebates like a half a basis point, and then you've got a decent amount of swingers who do take liquidity that are swinging around millions, so they add up to tens of millions in monthly volume. They don't day trade with that amount. They're swing trading and stuff. So yeah, they unlock like 4 or 3.5 basis point taker fees, and so it averages it lower. And so yeah, they're doing $12 million a day in fee flow. So in this scenario, like folks, like we can't be just thinking about like, how do I compete with the guys who like airdropped a coin and it's a big success and everybody's rich. And it's it's nice to have $2 million. I'd love to have $2 million. Fly to Egypt and give a bunch away to refugees and try to get them on crypto, get them on DeFi to get their income more stable, or maybe more unstable if they're not disciplined. I would, have a bigger family. Maybe I'd get another car, get like a used car for like $6,000 for my wife. Okay, like I don't want to, I don't care about that. So you would like, I'm gonna put all my kids in private school, and I'm gonna like pay down my mortgage, and your house is like more expensive, whatever, right? I just built a house for my mother-in-law for less than $5,000. With finishings, it'll add up to like 7,000, 8,000 bucks. It's more land. This is why Henry George is the base. But anyway, no, the point is that we got to think big. And when it's like, okay, now I'm gonna think bigger. I'm gonna compete with the guy who went to jail for 4 months. He like flew in from Dubai and did an ICO in 2017 and has the lowest liquidity. And it's like, bro, this is with the Super Saiyan scaling factor, with a fee rate that is like 95% is 90% cheaper than Binance's baseline fee rate. I'm assuming it's 5 basis points. And it's a bigger number than Binance because this is what we're going for. We might say, well, you're never gonna, well, never say never, but AI is gonna change the whole world. The human error is gonna end. Judgment Day is gonna happen. Whatever, maybe never in that sense. You run out of time in like human history. But like, you might say it's not realistic to think about $37 trillion a day. And it's like, okay, fine. I can see that. Let's get how about $1 trillion a day? Okay. Um, so we got Bitcoin as a $10 trillion asset at $500,000. Okay. We got Litecoin as a $300 billion asset, $600 billion, $1 trillion, maybe for a little while, swings around in that range. Because of the monetary premium as well as this, because like the monetary premium gets stronger. This is the flywheel that like Hyperliquid's app chain or Solana doesn't have because they're proof of stake or POS, which is like there's another thing you can fill in what that acronym stands for. Proof of work can be adopted by the Muslim nations, as I talked about on Lakewood Underground. Can be adopted by a lot of nations. Paraguay is another good example. Um, a confederation of decentralized national utility in the energy resources that are being wasted otherwise, creating a counterweight to Sino-Russo or Anglo-American supremacies. That sounds like it's worth a lot, not the whole world, but it's worth like a third of the world. It's worth like a fifth of the world. It's worth something. It's worth a lot. And you can't really, people will argue this. The ETH guy argued that, oh, you can attack Bitcoin with $10 billion. A state actor can do it. And essentially, you could make that argument that yes, currently that is true about Bitcoin. And Litecoin is like way script mining, even with Dogecoin. So Litecoin's weaker than Dogecoin in terms of the market cap. And that with the script network, there's diminishing return. It's actually harder to 50% attack because of the RAM intensivity of it. Um, so if you just spam more of these, I could be wrong about that, but I think it's a little bit harder to crowd out a 51% attack in terms of dollar for dollar ability to, start permanently censoring blocks and so on. Um, so, these are serious questions actually, but I'm skeptical that Ethereum or Solana proof of stake or Hyperliquid proof of stake for that matter would be any better. So this is a question that we're gonna see play out on the world stage. It's kind of beyond the scope of my business ambitions. But anyway, so $1 trillion a day published on chain. No, it's only $10 billion a day that gets published on chain, and it creates this cash flow. Okay, so annualize that, and that is pretty cool. And then give it a pop of like, let's say 7p ratio, and it's like that's like that is like just basically getting into the arena of like competing with Hyperliquid in terms of like the market cap. So this is like still a bullish asset potentially compared to Hyperliquid at that level. And then what does that mean? So obviously, man can dream, right? um, this is where I need to go in order to fulfill my mission of being a Bitcoiner, which means you got to be a Litecoiner because Bitcoin is captured by orthodoxy as these things go. To be a true religious person, you have to go against religious orthodoxy because it's corrupt and it's abetting evil, things like this, right? So, okay, so like if 10 billion is actually printed on chain, And then what do those prints look like? Only $10,000 prints. That's the funny thing about those. I mean, these are not crazy sized trades. This is sort of like your average print. Um, this is like bots trading pretty small size, actually. So they would tend to be bigger than this. But yeah, as like a minimum. So I mean, it would probably be higher than that, right? In practice. Bybit. Where's Bybit? Boobit. Maybe that's not the per. Yeah. And their fees are the most expensive. I mean, they're charging Maker 2 basis points. Ridiculous. Shouldn't be charging anything. They're charging Taker like 7 basis points or five or so. They have very high fees. Yeah, so I mean, their prints are pretty small actually, right? I don't know. But this is not really the prime time. It's not the prime time of your life. Ooh, $5,000. Yeah, I mean, so Binance, I mean, this is people, they can do spot for free, but here they're paying. So yeah, they'll do about point 0.1, do about 10K is like a minimum, but the average is actually pretty good. Pretty good. Doing 100K, 200K, that was a million almost. That's pretty hot. Because people want to swing sides. They like the fast results. They like seeing, $100 P&L swings every minute. It's just what they like. Whereas spot trading, what is this classic options? Classic comedy. I see prints. Are these live? Are these doing volume? No, they're not. They're trading a few times a minute. But you can go to point oh 0.01, which I like. I'm gonna use that for a scalping system soon. That's on my agenda after I debug the futures and get that out. Gonna start trading actively. Yeah, I mean, they're doing a dozen prints a minute. It's not bad. It's not bad. Anyway, getting into the weeds here. I'll look at Deribit later and see how if they're closing the gap. Yeah, I mean, so this is kind of the ambition. It's because if we don't do this, then we don't get to have a Litecoin blockchain, folks. It's true. It's true. It's sad but true. We need to fill up the blocks. We need to create at least 50% revenue to the miners in fees. And then we need to scale that by another 10x. ultimately, so that it becomes politically challenging to attack these proof of work chains. And that's how we win. That's how Satoshi's vision actually manifests as victory. Um, and so what's good for Litecoin and Dogecoin and Bitcoin is good for trade layer. That means good for you folks. It's gonna be a wonderful, folks. You're gonna love it. You're gonna have a great time. All right. Anyway, that's enough jabber. Remember that chick with the bubble gum? I was like, oh wow, I wanna have a girl like that. Put her arm around me while I play in the arcade. And she doesn't care about anything. She just blows bubbles. I remember seeing this scene, and I was like, man, I want to join the Foot Club. They got like the best arcade, man.
Check it out, man. Anything you guys want, we got.
They got a
Anything
skateboard.
you want to do it. You know what I'm saying? Anything.
You know what
Got
I'm
any
saying?
cigarettes?
You got any cigarettes?
Regular or menthol?
This was a PG movie, so they weren't like got weed, got cocaine. This is basically the crypto industry right now. And then you got this Japanese guy like ready to beat kids up. Go play. It's like Cheng Peng right there. I know it's kind of racist because he's Chinese and everything. Technically it's Canadian, but it's a little bit funny, given that there is an analogy. All right. This is what we got. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I'm gonna get to fixing these bugs. Cheers.